as you know, this morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, the Justice Department released the redacted form of the Mueller report. It's 400 pages, quite evenly divided actually. 200 pages dealing with the collusion between Trump and his campaign with Russia in influencing the election of 2016 to assist Trump in winning the election, and a second volume, 200 pages, dealing with the president's obstruction of the investigation. So it's sort of bifurcated into those two parts, volume 1 and volume 2. Now, a lot of the attention over the past 27 days, so since Barr received the report, the presently newly appointed Attorney General of Trump received the report and came out with his now infamous 4-page letter substantially distorting the substantive content of the report. Most of the media and a lot of the regular Democratic Party, the traditional Democratic Party, led by Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden and the most of the chairs of the committees in the House and the ranking members of the Democratic Party in the Senate, have been pretty much giving up on attempting to argue that there was collusion or a major criminal conspiracy on the part of Trump and his campaign leaders with Russia because of the effectiveness of William Barr's initial 4-page letter. He repeatedly stated that Mueller had found that there was no evidence of collusion. Aside from the semantic argument about what the relationship is between the term collusion and criminal conspiracy, the assertion on the part of Barr so baldly that that Mueller had found no evidence to support any conclusion that there was a collusion between the Trump and his campaign and Russia. Most of the media, even including MSNBC, has kind of fallen away from that charge, and it was they were concentrating most of their attention on the issue of obstruction, because as Barr reported some 25 days ago now, he reported that the special counsel Mueller had in fact just not come to the conclusion that there was adequate evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Trump obstructed justice. And so because that characterization by Barr of the conclusion that Mueller had come to with regard to the obstruction of justice charge was more nebulous or more ambiguous than the purportedly conclusive determination on the part of Mueller that there was no evidence of any collusion. That's why most of the attention was being directed to the issue of obstruction. So this is the portion of the obstruction report here. But you'll discover that it's 200 pages long. So is the volume 1 that has to do with collusion. And so the important aspect of this is that there is more than ample evidence in volume 1 having to do with collusion and conspiracy and coordination and cooperation between Trump and his campaign leadership and Russia. Even though the special counsel said that he wasn't convinced that there was adequate proof to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that each of them was involved with the type of scienter or evil intent that was necessary, that they may have been just so incompetent and kind of abysmally ignorant about the law, given the fact that most of them had no governmental experience at all, that they may have just been completely inept in not understanding the full implications of what they were doing, that was a conceivable interpretation of the evidence. But he did go to the point of laying it all out. And he said a very interesting thing, and it's important to look at it this way. It said that they also said that in light of the fact that the Office of Legal Counsel for the White House had issued an official opinion letter specifically stating that the president could not be criminally indicted so long as he was in office, that consideration had caused them, it said, in light of that consideration, the facts that are known to us and the strong public interest in safeguarding the integrity of the criminal justice system, because of this, we conducted a thorough factual investigation in order to preserve the evidence when memories were fresh and the documentary materials were still available. Now that's a really critical thing for him to say, because what he's doing is he's preserving the evidence, both the testimonial evidence and the documentary evidence. For whom? That's the key to this thing, because he makes the finding right at the beginning where Barr had said in his 4-page letter, he said, not only was there no evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia in affecting the 2016 presidential election, not only was there no evidence, but the special prosecutor or special counsel had not taken into account in any regard at all this issue of the president allegedly not being able to be criminally indicted while he was in office, that it played no role in his determination that there was not adequate evidence to convict anybody. Right at the beginning of this, Mueller points out at page 1 of volume 2 that ruling on the part of the Office of Legal Counsel, the White House Office of Legal Counsel, is fundamental to the fact that he didn't return criminal charges against the president. And he goes on page 1 of volume 2 to state at least 5 different times, giving 5 different reasons why, in light of this ruling by the White House Office of Legal Counsel, he was not returning criminal charges against Trump, and pointed out that, however, that same restriction didn't apply to the other people, so those people could be criminally prosecuted for this. Now that's extremely important, because this is a simple bald-faced lie on the part of William Barr, the newly appointed Attorney General. And you'll remember that one of the reasons why Trump was so upset with Jeff Sessions as his Attorney General is because he would not intervene and protect him against this investigation. He actually went to the point of saying, "Where is my Roy Cohn?" Now that doesn't mean much to folks in your generation because you don't know who Roy Cohn was, but Roy Cohn was the henchman lawyer for McCarthy, for Joe McCarthy, when he was going after any kind of social democrat, any kind of liberal democrat, most anybody who read more than 2 books a year back in the mid-50s. And Roy Cohn, as counsel to the House Un-American Activities Committee and the Senate Committee on Internal Subversion, was a henchman for him. And so that's exactly what Trump was looking for. And because Jeff Sessions wouldn't do that for him, he fired him basically and got rid of him. and brought on William Barr, whom you may have heard by this time, auditioned for the position by sending I think it was a 180 or an 80-page legal memo to Trump, telling him why Trump could not be found guilty of obstructing justice. And he sent it to him, and then out of all of the lawyers in the entire country, Trump decides to choose him to be his new attorney general. And of course, that's what Barr said. Barr faithfully performed his duty, his expected duty, and he came forward and he attempted first in his 4-page letter and now in his hastily called press conference this morning at 9:30, an hour and a half before the actual content of the report, even redacted, was going to be made available to Congress. What he did is last Thursday contacted the lawyers for Trump, private lawyers for Trump, and made a copy of that available for them on Tuesday and Wednesday for them to go through to prepare their counter arguments against it before even giving it to Congress. So we know that. And he once again reiterated that there was that Mueller had found no evidence to support a charge of collusion between the Trump campaign and Trump and Russia in affecting the election. And now, as of 11:01 Eastern Time this morning, it was transparent that he was lying. He was lying when he first came out with his 4-page report, and he was lying again this morning, because there are in fact 200 pages of evidence of the steps that were taken to collude, and so that is, and I think probably one of the most important single pieces of evidence. Now we're going to be discussing this in more detail on Tuesday's class because of the national importance of what's happening right now. I mean, that you won't be able to turn on a television set, even the radio, a lot of the radio, without hearing all about this here today, because it's all over the news. But the most important single piece of evidence is that when Manafort, as the chairman of Trump's campaign, sat down and met in a cigar store in New York City with a Russian agent, intelligence agent, he provided to him internal polling data that had been gathered by the campaign. Now, we had heard that before, but what we found out this morning at 11:02 was that, in fact, the specific polling information that Manafort, as the campaign chairman for Trump, was turning over to the Russian intelligence agent was polling data about Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Wisconsin, up in the Northeast, which are the exact states that Russia targeted and started pouring information in and sending out fake tweets and fake emails and trying to get all of the people there angry at Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party. And that was done by Russia at the direct behest of Putin and the GRU. In fact, there were 12 GRU Russian intelligence officers indicted by Mueller for doing that. Okay, and what we found out this morning is that specific polling data that was handed over by Manafort as the campaign chairman related to the exact states where everybody was stunned that those, in fact, were won by Trump. Okay, now they also proved that, and we'll find the pages of this because we haven't had time to really go through all these things yet, but they also found that the Russian intelligence had, in fact, penetrated one or more of the actual Democratic Party computers out in the states, getting access to their data as to who was for or against Trump or Hillary, and that they actually penetrated their computers to find this out. So they actually had the emails and contact information for individual voters, which enabled Russia to send fake emails to those people, okay? And very importantly, and I want you to remember this just in this first discussion that we're having about this, is that what they have found in the part one is that Trump personally constantly denied that there was absolute proof that Russia was attempting to meddle in the election. And he insisted that anything that they may have done had no impact on the election itself. And so therefore, there was no need for him to take any steps whatsoever to keep Russia from doing it again. So that he, in the office of the president, has undertaken no steps whatsoever to prevent Russia from doing the same thing in the 2020 election to help him win again. And the special prosecutor has reviewed this and said, if that could be proven, that was his motive in not proposing any type of legislation or executive orders to do anything to protect the United States against Russia doing this again in 2020, if that were done for a corrupt motive, that is for the purpose of helping him maintain the purported legitimacy of his presidency based on the 2016 election, or to help him win the 2020 election, if that could be proven, then that would in fact constitute a violation of law. But he pointed out again, in light of the opinion from the White House Office of Legal Counsel that the president could not be indicted or charged with a criminal offense while in office, that he refrained from coming to the conclusion that the president had committed a criminal violation in that. And what he points out over and over again, however, and this is extremely important, and this is from page 171 to 180 in volume 2, he goes on at some length to point out that even though he, as the criminal investigator, may have been prevented from returning criminal charges against Trump because of the White House Office of Legal Counsel's opinion, he said it was still possible for the Congress to impeach him for these things. And very importantly, what he said was, look, you need to understand that I am not like one of the special prosecutors back during Watergate, that statute expired. And there's only internal Justice Department rules about personally hiring a special attorney by the Justice Department to focus on just one case, which is what he is. And he said, therefore, because I am a regular employee of the Justice Department, I am bound by the internal rules and regulations that have been set up by the Justice Department pursuant to this White House Office of Legal Counsel ruling. So he says it over and over again, that the heart of the reason why he has not returned criminal charges against Trump, either for collusion or for obstruction, is because of the Office of Legal Counsel ruling and his status as an employee of the Justice Department. And so therefore he's bound by those rules and regulations. But he goes on to point out between page 171 and 180 of volume 2, he points out over and over and over again that Congress has the power to impeach the president, and points out that he has taken the step of thoroughly investigating and reporting this information to preserve the record of evidence. What this constitutes is, and you'll hear the term many times now over the next few months as this carries on, that this is the roadmap for the impeachment. And he goes on to write a brief basically in support of the Judicial Committee, the House Judiciary Committee, to impeach the president for these accusations, okay? To the point where he cited United States versus Nixon 7 times in 6 pages, okay? So, yes, you had a question?
You answered it.
Okay, yeah, okay. So the number one, it's the number one thing to keep in mind is that William Barr's assertion in his previous 4-page letter and in his half-hour press conference this morning prior to releasing this specifically stated that the office of the White House Office of Legal Counsel's opinion that a president could not be indicted while in office played no role in Mueller's decision not to return criminal charges against Trump is completely false. And it's astonishing, shocking, as some of the people referred to it this morning, shocking that he thought he could have gotten away with that. That he just plain said it and hoped that the American people would just swallow that. And therefore, when he said there was no evidence to support any collusion, that they would back away from that entire charge. And in fact, you saw that the regular Democratic Party did. They backed away from that. That Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer all started saying, well, it's really good. It's good news that we have found out that our president did not collude with Russia and his campaign did not collude with Russia, because that would have undermined the legitimacy of his entire presidency. So that's really a good thing. That's not a good thing, because it wasn't even true. Okay, so you're seeing right away, right in front of you, what I want you to do is I want you to get up on your toes and basically be watching what's going on here, because you're seeing this thing of the Republican Party and all of these Republican attorney generals and everybody else making these preposterous statements like there's no evidence of collusion. And then you're finding the regular Democratic Party going, oh, well, good, that was good news that there was no collusion. Let's just turn and focus on the obstruction of justice. And so they basically let go of an entire 200 pages of the report, the regular Democrats. Okay? Now, I don't think that's going to survive. I think that the Justice Democrats, I think that the AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and the other new members of the House of Representatives are going to call this to the attention of Nancy Pelosi. Let me turn this off. That I think that they're going to be able to put so much pressure on Nancy Pelosi and Schumer and the other regular Democrats, including Joe Biden, that it's going to be almost impossible for them not to impeach the president. Okay? Now, what they're going to continue to do is they're going to continue to argue that, oh, we're just looking into things. We're not doing this with the intention of impeaching him. We just want to find out additional information, for example, that are in some of these blacked out pages. They've got a handful of these pages that are completely blacked out, but they were surprised. I think most of them were surprised that there were as few totally blacked out pages as there are. But they're still going to keep leaning on this thing of, oh, the only reason we're doing these investigations is to try to find out the additional information, not only the blacked out information from the report, but the documents behind it, the actual transcripts of the interviews of the witnesses and all of that the Democrats are after. And what they're trying to do is the new, more moderate Democratic Party, the Gebhardt Democrats, the Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Democratic Party, are trying to basically just drag this out, to have this kind of like Chinese water torture thing go on between now and the election. And in 2020, just rolling out new pieces of evidence against Trump and his campaign, and thinking that it's going to increase teleologically and unfoldingly, increasingly, the chances of the Democratic Party just simply beating Trump in the 2020 election. And it's going to increase the probabilities of them being able to defeat a 5 to 6 or 7 United States senators that are Republicans out of the 22, I think, that are having to run for re-election, so that the Democrats can take control of the Senate. So they can then, in fact, get back on top of making policy, with the Democratic president and the leadership now having the chairs of both the House and the Senate. And now, it's not that there's no good argument to be made for that, because we know perfectly well that one of the very first things they would do from a hypothetical Joe Biden in Kamala Harris administration with a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House, one of the very first things they would do is start reinstituting a lot of the environmental protection executive orders that Trump just eliminated, because there's a clear record of what they are. I mean, we all know what they are. They're all a matter of record, and they've got them all computerized, so they could just basically put them all back into effect, sort of in the first day of a Joe Biden and Kamala Harris administration. And that's going to be completely consistent with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's campaign, which is going to be, let's get back to normal. Let's just get back to normal. And by implication, let's not go any further than that. Let's just get back to normal so that we can be like as if Hillary Clinton won. But let's not go the length of electing somebody like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. Let's not have, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have any kind of major influence on policy. Let's not become radical here. Let's not become socialists. That's going to be the theme that's going on here. But the advantage that we have as of today is that it's going to be harder and harder for Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden and the others to hold back the tide on this. You need to remember that the Democratic Party won over 3 million more votes in the country for Hillary Clinton being president than Donald Trump. And so there's a clear major majority of people in the country that don't want to have these kind of changes that are being made. They don't want judges like Kavanaugh. They don't want environmental legislation being revoked like they're doing now. And so that entire majority of the people now are going to be mobilized behind this information. And you can be sure that the Justice Democrats are going to be mobilizing that type of public support, focusing on not only passing the Green New Deal so that they can't be accused of just doing nothing but trying to impeach Trump. They're at one and the same time going to be passing the Green New Deal, we hope, in the House of Representatives, and we hope to lead that fight out of California. That our office right now is working on actually drafting the component elements of an omnibus Green New Deal statute in California. And we're working on that. We've got interns from up at Santa Clara University that are working on that right now. And we're having meetings again, actually tomorrow, with some major Democratic Party people. We've issued invitations to Republicans to participate in this, but we're not getting a lot of overwhelming reception from them to work on passing an omnibus Green New Deal bill in California. But returning to this issue here, what I'm saying is that it would have been a major part of the regular Democratic Party's agenda to put aside the issue of impeachment and to be able to hold congressional hearings just on the kind of procedural or technical grounds of we just want to find out what was the rest of the report. What was blacked out? Let us as Congress get a look at the investigative hearings, the investigative interviews, et cetera, in the documents. I don't think that's going to hold anymore. I think that there's enough evidence on the record, and very importantly, the most important thing that's going to be happening in this field in the immediate future, I think it's May 20th or 21st, they're going to be calling Mueller before the House Judiciary Committee to inquire from him what he really means by these things that he's done here. But the fact of the matter is, in this portion of Volume 2, from page 171 to 180, in addition to citing United States versus Nixon over and over and over and over again, what he does in here is he puts forth this roadmap, and he cites cases to support it that go back all the way to 1831. And there's several places where they cite Supreme Court cases from the 1880s and 1870s and 1850s. I mean, what they're showing is that there are bedrock principles that have been operational in our country for over 150 years that are governing what ought to be done here. Okay? And so what he's done is he's, in a sense, started to write the brief for the House Judiciary Committee supporting their impeachment of the president. Now, we still have the fundamental challenge here, which is an important one. And what Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and the others and Joe Biden will tell you if you have dinner with him, he'll sit there and tell you, he says, look, it's a waste of time to do this in the House because we're going to go up to the Senate and they're not going to convict him. The Republicans won't convict him. He could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and they won't convict him. And so we don't want to go through that whole process. That's what they're going to say. Okay? But the fact of the matter is that on this record here, the failure of the House of Representatives to impeach a president who is guilty of the things that have been found here as a matter of fact to have been done would be a complete dereliction of their constitutional duty to get rid of a person like this from the presidency. So that's the important thing to keep in mind here. Can I get a drink of water? Somebody got any water anywhere here? Okay, just thank you, John. So just the first thing I want you to keep in mind is the fact that William Barr lied when he said that the reason that Mueller had not returned any criminal charges for either collusion or obstruction against the president had nothing to do with this White House Office of Legal Counsel ruling that a president couldn't be indicted or criminally charged while he's in office. That's number one. And number two, to remember, is that it was a complete and unabrogated lie for him to state over and over again that Mueller had found no evidence to support a charge of collusion and conspiracy with the Soviet Union. And I want you thirdly to remember with regard to the collusion issue, remember that meeting that took place with Manafort and the Russian intelligence agent in the cigar store where Manafort turned over to them internal polling data directly related to the 4 states that made all the difference in the campaign outcome. And therefore, the Congress has to find out what it is that the Russians actually did in those particular states and what effect it had, because that will go directly to the issue of undermining the legitimacy of the election itself of Trump, okay? And the fourth thing I want you to remember is that is exactly why Trump will not, in fact, acknowledge that the Russians did this, and will not acknowledge that they did it to get him elected, and he will not do anything from the office of the president to try to protect our country against Russia doing it again in 2020. And that is a failure on the part of the President of the United States to protect the national security of the United States. That kind of thing starts to potentially erode his base of people that are extremely concerned about protecting the national security of the United States. Okay? So that what you're seeing happening here is that on the one hand, there's going to be the effort on the part of the Justice Democrats, let's call them the Ocasio-Cortez Democrats, to push forward all the evidence that supports an impeachment and supports criminal charges against Trump and his associates. And at the same time, there's going to be this effort on the part of the moderate Democrats just to drag this thing out, to do the investigations, to leak out the information that they're getting about it, to try to besmirch Trump, to try to undermine his support within even, not his base, but within the independents, primarily, that they so much rely upon. That the regular Democrats have moved to the right of center, just to the right of center. Thank you, John. Thank you. So that I just want us to get clear about what the dynamics are that are going on here so that you can follow this. Now, what I would propose is that what you do is that now I don't know if you guys have it all on your phones now mostly, but I would ask you to each evening. I know you got lots of work to do and papers to do and all that kind of stuff, but I would ask you to watch at least one of the news shows that goes on from, I guess, 6 o'clock in the afternoon to 11. Yeah.
I was going to ask a question based off of like the whole collusion aspect.
Yeah.
So I listen to a lot of podcasts, right?
Yeah.
I listen to like numerous a day, and I listen to The Argument by the Times. And it is
By the which?
The Times. It's called The Argument.
Yes.
And it basically debates topics in politics and in law that's both from the left and the right, right?
Mhm.
And some central viewpoints. They're talking about how, when you think about it in this other perspective, this whole focus from the left on Trump's collusion with Russia and trying to impeach him, it's also taking away time and focus from other initiatives. Like, it could be the homeless epidemic, it could be climate justice, like AOC and someone else dropped a video today. Right? I don't know if you saw that. That was like really hard hitting. Yeah. But basically, what they were arguing from the right was saying is like, we're focusing so much on trying to impeach him and collusion and everything, but it's like we're losing basis on what's going on in our society today.
Mhm.
Like, for example, Extinction Rebellion in the UK right now.
Mhm.
Are you aware with that?
The which?
Extinction Rebellion. Like, it's like climate justice like protests.
Oh, yeah.
So people are literally gluing themselves to floors outside of the parliament, outside of like certain like, government buildings because they want to have climate justice reform as soon as possible. And they're trying to grasp as much attention from parliament as they can.
Mhm.
And basically what these people were saying, what they were arguing is, look at all the time and effort we could have focused on things that would have been really important that we see like, day in, day out, like rather than trying to focus on impeachment so much. I know it's like a really big topic, and it's really sensitive because it could provide a precedent for the future that would give the president a lot of power in a sense. But it's also like, look at from another perspective, look at the left, like we're focusing so much on what the right wants. They want the body, the student body, the next generation to focus so much on trying to impeach someone and then lose basis on like corporate, like private organizations trying to like take more resources from like middle countries or like second generation third world countries. So that's just like my perspective, because I've like listened to a lot of like stories about it, a lot of like newscasts, and it's like everyone's just kind of like talking about collusion, and no one's really talking about a lot of like other important initiatives, like in Sudan as well, like the new president in Indonesia, Israel's new elections. It's like there's so much going on in the world, and we're like isolated from it.
Well, the fact is that the reason, he's saying that there's an argument being made by people on the left as well as on the right that spending as much time and energy as people are on trying to get him impeached and prove collusion with Russia in his campaign, that they're ignoring other important agenda items like the poor and the housing and the environmental issues and the issues of foreign wars, the whole issue of the Israeli-Palestine problem. The fact is they're not ignoring those things. The fact is there are all kinds of other committees that are doing their stuff all the time. And there's a couple, the House Judiciary Committee is the one that has been delegated the responsibility to do this. There is the Oversight and Investigations Committee that has general responsibility for the operations of the government. Those are two committees out of the 36 committees that are in the House of Representatives. So a lot of those are all continuing to do their work. And it's true that the news media is covering a lot of these things. They are, because they say that it's a major issue, because they believe that the president in the position that he's in has the ability to do deep and lasting structural damage to the constitutional fabric of the country. And so they're covering a lot of that, but the other people in the other committees, in the other 34 committees or so in the House, and they're not doing, in the Senate, what they're doing is the Senate Intelligence Subcommittee is trying to investigate the origins of the investigation. So the Republicans, even though the right wing is arguing that we shouldn't be spending a lot of our time doing this, they've got the Senate committee now insisting upon investigating the origins of the investigation. and and they've got this. I don't know if any of you have gotten a chance to look at it yet, but you should. If you haven't looked at it yet, I want you to look at that Epic Times video. There's an Epic Times video that I've assigned to you already that's got a 35-minute part 1 and a 45-minute part 2. It is the slickest presentation of the counter-argument that is being made in the Senate now about there being a deep state conspiracy to unseat Trump because he is opposed to their one world policies. Okay? It's an extraordinarily effective piece of work that they've done. It turns out that it's a group of people from China. The Falun Gong people have financed that. But I want you to take a look at it because I want you to understand that in the context of all the energy that's being put in by the media to focus on this issue, that there are two sides to this that are going to be clashing, that I want you to be able to understand their best arguments they have.